Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the GM. It is your guy, Boulanger. Up next, 2025 Baltimore Ravens season preview. Let's talk. The season is here. This is Wednesday of week 1. But when I look at each game, each team that we're going to face, there is really no gimmies over the course of 17 games. There are some opponents that we should just flat out win against, like Ravens versus them. There should be no question that we win, but there is no gimmies because I've seen some of the teams on our schedule kind of develop a new attitude, develop a new approach. Some of them have had new head coaches installed. And so I think that the contest will be much more difficult than the schedule would indicate, right? Meaning the name on the schedule, you look at that name, that team's name, and you just chalk it up as a win. I think it's going to be more difficult than that. Let's talk some more specifics about this schedule. First up, we have Buffalo, then we have Cleveland. Then I think over the next 4 weeks, we have Detroit, the Rams, and KC. Now, I'm not sure about anybody else's schedule. That's not my concern. But who has a tougher opening first 6 games than that? Buffalo, Detroit, the Rams, KC, and a tough Cleveland team. Nobody that I can think of. And then when you go past the bye week, you're still going to face off against Pittsburgh twice, the Bengals twice, and a much improved new mindset New York Jets. You're going to face off against, I think Miami is after the bye week. You're going to face off against, you're going to face off against a Minnesota team. You're going to face off against Green Bay. And so when you look at just that portion of the schedule, that's not all 17, of course, but when you look at just those 9 or 10 games, nobody has a tougher schedule than that. And so let's estimate the toughness. The Buffalo Bills were in the AFC Championship last year, the same team that put us out of the playoffs. The Kansas City Chiefs were in the Super Bowl last year. The Rams were in the playoffs last year. The Cincinnati Bengals was on the fringe, and we get them twice, were on the fringe of the playoffs last year. The Detroit Lions were in the playoffs last year. The Green Bay Packers were in the playoffs last year. Let me see who else. Let me think. The Houston Texans, which I didn't mention earlier, were also in the playoffs last season. And there's probably another. Minnesota Vikings were in the playoffs last season. And so 8 of the 17 games, we're going to face off against playoff teams. And then you got to add in the Pittsburgh Steelers, who we did defeat in the playoffs, but we get them twice. So that's 9 or 10 of the games that we play against playoff teams from last season and or a very close competitive playoff fringe team. And so there's no weeks off this year. And so that's why I think the Baltimore Ravens go 12-5. Okay. The second question I think that we need to answer when we're looking at this season is, will the Ravens be disciplined and consistent? They go hand in hand. Discipline and consistency are married together. When you have one, you're going to develop the other. And consistency and discipline was not on our side last year. It's not something that we invoked a lot last year because we were one of, if not the most penalized teams. And there was a lot of times that caused us hurt and harm, right? There was some times where we had big plays that were negated by a holding penalty. There was times where we were second and short and it was negated by an offsides penalty. There was times where we were lining up in the wrong spots, creating illegal formation penalties. And that continued the entire season last year. And then we come into this season and there was a lot of frustration from John Harbaugh. Why? Because that same undisciplined nature continued into this off season. So the hope is that the Baltimore Ravens have that fixed, right? Hopefully that we've done enough strategizing, done enough game planning, done enough implementation, and we have that penalty issue fixed. Because when you talk about what people call self-inflicted wounds, an illegal formation, that's a self-inflicted wound. A False start is a self-inflicted wound, especially when you break the huddle knowing what the snap count is. Holding sometimes can be a little push or pull when it comes to responsibility, especially when the offensive lineman gets beat off the jump and he doesn't have another choice, basically. But that's still a self-inflicted wound, right? Dropped balls and things of that nature, those are self-inflicted wounds. And so the hope is that we can be consistent and disciplined. And I think that's a question that will be answered in the first 4 weeks of this season. Question number 3. Question number 3 for the Baltimore Ravens this season is, who will step up to help Lamar Jackson? We understand around Baltimore that we have a motto or a slogan or a catchphrase, and that catchphrase is, as long as we have Lamar, we have a chance. And that sounds real good until you start to realize that mantra runs out. You see, as long as you have Lamar, you do have a chance, but you need some other guys around him to step up consistently. Right? I think that we have depth at the wide receiver position where it doesn't have to be the same guy every week to ball out. And so as long as someone steps up every week, that should be sufficient. I know that we're going to start this season down one of our top tight ends, a top receiving threat for the Baltimore Ravens in Isaiah Likely. So will Charlie Kolar step up, right? When you look at the running back room, will Keaton Mitchell step up, right? When you look at the defense, will Mike Green step into his own? Not as a starter necessarily, but in a good rotational piece in a pass rushing situation where it's 3rd and 8, 3rd and 5, 3rd and long, you're trying to get the other team off the field. Can Mike Green be that closeout performer, right? When you look at the interior linebacker positions, will Roquan step back into a full Pro Bowl mode? Yeah, he made the Pro Bowl, but he wasn't excellent last season, right? I'm not saying he was trash, but he was not excellent last season. And who will be his running mate? Will Trenton Simpson step up in his 3rd season, which is to be expected? Or will there be one of the rookies to take him off the field? When you look at the secondary, what will we get out of Jair Alexander? What will we get from Malachi Starks? What will we get from Nate Wiggins? Will he take that great next step? See, all of these components are guys who need to step up around Lamar Jackson so that if he does have a down game, if he does have an off game, and every great player does, he has enough help around him to continue to lift him. You see, one of the great examples of if Lamar doesn't do it, nobody does is the Buffalo Bills game. We understand that, Lamar Jackson had the interception early in that game, first half. But when you look at the rest of the players around him, nobody really stepped into their own except Isaiah Likely to help him out. Then when we got into the second half, when he needed other players to do some things, maybe a closeout sack to get the Bills off the field, maybe a stuffed run to make it 4th down versus 1st down again. We didn't see those plays be made. And then 2 times when the Baltimore Ravens had an opportunity to do some clutch things, whether it's Mark Andrews with the fumble, whether it's Mark Andrews with the drop pass, those are the kind of things that in 2025, because of the stoutness of our schedule, we're going to need. If the guys around Lamar can step up and be seen and heard from, he can begin to play more free. You absolutely have seen Lamar try to take a game over because nobody else is doing their jobs around him. And that works for a while, but when another team recognizes it's Lamar or nothing, it's easier for them to defend him. And so we want Lamar playing relaxed and free, not uptight. And I believe that Mistakes will be lessened, just like last year. Only 4 interceptions. Don't know how many fumbles he had. But that's the kind of Lamar Jackson we want to see in 2025. And then the biggest question of all, do the Baltimore Ravens have the capacity to make noise in the AFC playoffs and advance to a Super Bowl? See, we're not talking about roster at this point. We know we have notable names, high-paid guys, Pro Bowlers and former Pro Bowlers. We know this team is loaded with talent, but capacity is different. Capacity speaks to how much volume you can handle. And that's something we don't know just yet, because this team in 2025 has not been tested. There are some guys who have performed well under pressure. Lamar Jackson is a big lights kind of player, with the exception of some hiccups in the playoffs. Can he take the heat when the playoffs get here? When you look at a guy like a Mark Andrews, who does not perform well in the playoffs, and it just continued this past season, will he be able to step up and take the heat when the playoffs arrive? Especially as he will have a head start on this season on Isaiah Likely. Will the offensive line be able to be sufficient? I'm not saying elite. I'm not saying top 10. I'm just saying sufficient. Will the run blocking be enough? Will the pass blocking be enough to sustain drives, to keep Jackson upright? See, those are the questions when it comes to, can they take the heat? And so those are the things, man. I know I had 3 questions in the beginning, but as I began to talk, other questions began to pop up. But I think those are the 4 questions that have to be answered. Those are the storylines, the questions, the perspectives that we have to know. And I think it will not take long. It will not take long to get those questions answered. I think we'll know the answers to these questions in, through, and out of the Buffalo game. And so to close out, I think the Baltimore Ravens have the toolkit to go win it all. In fact, I believe that they will win it all, with 2 contingencies. Health has to stay intact, beginning with Lamar, Derek, and Kyle. And I also think discipline, consistency, and decision-making from the coaching staff has to also be well above average. This cannot be an average season with discipline, consistency, and coaching. It has to be done at an above average to an elite level. Because a lot of times when we get into the heat of the battles, coaching definitely shows up. So listen, man, that's my thoughts for the season. You guys let me know what your questions are, what the storylines are, and what you're looking forward to seeing over the course of 17 weeks. I'm out.